Hi, this is Ken Parker welcoming you to Common Ground, the policy roundtable, where we discuss issues of concern to Newton residents and try to hammer out some of our differences. For those of you who are new to the show, let me review the rules. First, I introduce a topic. Then we go around the table once, with each panelist expressing a viewpoint. I then select the two panelists who disagree the most strongly in hopes of finding some area of agreement. I then select them and let them talk to each other, that is, in hopes of finding some area of agreement. And at the end of each segment, I put in my 2 cents on the topic. Ordinarily, we have 3 topics on the show, or thereabouts, depending. This show, we have such an important topic, we're going to spend the full show on it, or in different subtopics, different aspects of our main topic, which is the City of Newton Tree Ordinance. And we have 2 fabulous panelists, both of whom are extremely knowledgeable about this topic. And so without further ado, let me introduce tonight's panel. To my left is Emily Norton. Welcome back on the show, Emily.
Great to be here, Ken. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. Emily, you have such an impressive resume and have done so many things. It's hard to know where to begin introducing you, but I'm going to start with your current job in the City of Newton, which is you're the Ward 2 Ward Councilor, meaning that you represent primarily Newtonville. Is it?
That's right.
And does Ward 2 go beyond Newtonville at all, or is it?
It has some edges from Newton Corner, Newton Center, and West Newton, but Newtonville's the heart of it.
And so in terms of professionally, you are the executive director or the president of the
executive director
of the Massachusetts Charles River Watershed Association?
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry.
It's all right.
And of course, before that, you ran the Sierra Club in Massachusetts.
That's right.
And you are on many important committees of the City Council, and you've run an education blog. You've done so many things in the community over the years. Anything else you want to mention that you're working on?
No, those cover it. Thank you.
Okay. And of course, you are currently the co-docketer with Julia Malachy of some proposed revisions to the tree ordinance. So
yeah, we have close to a dozen co-docketers, actually.
Oh, wow.
Julia and I worked most closely on putting it together, but we have quite a few co-docketers.
That's fabulous. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, can't wait to hear about what you're proposing to do with the tree ordinance. And also joined by Melissa Brown. Hi, Melissa.
Hi.
First time on our show. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Now, Melissa, you are the editor, and I'm going to get this wrong, of the Harvard Journal of, what is it?
Harvard Journal of Asiatic Studies.
Asiatic Studies. Thank you for
Sure.
helping me out there. And of course, you're also, I think it's fair to say at this point, a Newton activist or an environmental activist, or both. Maybe a Newton environmental activist.
Yes.
On the tree issue, you've been doing a lot of advocacy and grassroots communication on this. Is that?
Yes. So I started doing climate activism through our Revolution Massachusetts on the Climate Crisis Group. And I'm a co-founder of Trees as a Public Good Network. Those are both Commonwealth-wide activist groups. And I'm now a co-founder of Protect Newton Trees.
Fabulous. Well, thank you again for joining our panel tonight. And I should note for our audience, I think folks who are regular viewers of Common Ground know we try to get as much of a diversity of opinion on the panel as we can. We did invite Mayor Fuller to come on herself or send any representative she wanted to. And for whatever reason, I guess she has not sent someone tonight. I'm sure she'll join us for another conversation at some point, as she has in the past. But we also invited the chair of the Programs and Service Committee, who is dealing with this, and some of the other people who would express views. But unfortunately, we will not have that full range of viewpoint tonight, but we're going to have 100% very knowledgeable panelists, and I will try to ask some of the tough questions to make up for the lack of a dissenting voice to the extent that we can. So without further ado, let's well, actually, let me just give a little background on the tree ordinance, because it was first, Newton was a leader in this area a long time ago, in the 90s, I believe, or around, it might have been I think it was 99 we first passed the tree ordinance.
1999.
Yes, sorry, we're not 1899. Yeah, I was in my probably 4th term or 5th term on the city council, and I believe My friend and colleague Amy Sangiolo, who's left more recently than I have, was in her first term. And in her first term, she co-docketed the original tree ordinance. I think there might have been a lot of sponsors then too, but she and Mike Lipoff, who was a terrific pillar of the community for many years and worked on a lot of important projects, were the main co-docketers of the item. And of course, Amy, as folks know, recently ran for mayor and has been very active, and she was on our last episode of Common Ground, in fact. So they were the co-doctors. I was the chair of the Programs and Services Committee at the time and worked on a lot of the technical issues and getting it through, along with, I should give credit to Kathy Lester, later Kathy Salkert in the law department, who worked with us very closely in drafting the original tree ordinance. And the idea then was at that point that people could cut down on private property in the city of Newton without any public input. People could cut down all the trees on a property. There was no limit, no restriction on cutting down trees, and the idea was trees are a public good. We don't want people to. There were development projects happening where, a wooded parcel would just be totally. What's the word? Denuded?
Clear cut.
Clear cut. Thank you. I knew there was a word for that. And they would develop it and maybe plant a couple saplings in front, or maybe not. And there was no regulation of that. So we passed an ordinance which became a model, I think, for other communities, which said that you had to replace them in some way. But as folks know who are familiar with the lawmaking process, there's a cliche about this, which is laws are like sausages, in that if you like them, you should not ever watch them being made. And that there's a lot of compromise in the process, and it can be a little messy. And part of what we had to do was take some of the things that we wanted to include out of the ordinance and weaken it in ways to get enough votes to get it passed. Because a majority of a 24-member body can be a heavy lift sometimes. But we're very proud of what we accomplished then, but always expected that it would have to be updated at some point. But so my first question for the panel, though, and at the end of the segment I'll put in my 2 cents on what I thought at the time needed to be updated, but what are the things that that the panelists looking at the ordinance thought needed updating? In other words, why not leave the existing ordinance alone?
Get it? Leave? Yeah.
You see what I did there?
I got that.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Emily.
That's a great question. So really what inspired me to want to work on this is that I started getting so many complaints from residents about trees cut down by their neighbors that were affecting them. And I think that's the key concept here, or principle, is that the steps that you take on your own property don't just affect you. Because this does get into private property rights and what you're allowed to do on your own property, but we have evolved in other ways. It's no longer really, I don't know if it was ever allowed in Newton, but more widely, you can't just burn leaves on your own property. You can't, if you're changing your oil, I don't think it was all that unusual when I was a kid, changing the oil in your car, you can't just dump the motor oil down the drain. We do have limits on what you can do in your own property in other ways, and so.
So Emily, we had some limits in the ordinance. What was wrong
but we didn't
with
have limits in terms of private property when it wasn't a private developer. So when you cut down, especially a mature tree on your own property or a set of them, you make the air of your neighbors dirtier. You make the air hotter, particularly in the climate change era. When I was a kid, we didn't have 90-degree days, 100-degree days in the summer that much. When I was a kid, no houses had air conditioning. It's really different now, and it's going to be getting worse. So while maybe I would always have wanted to make it harder to cut down trees, it's getting to be more of an urgent issue. We're having more flooding thanks to climate change now. Trees hold in water, so when your neighbors cut down their trees, they're affecting you. So while thanks to you and your work, we have had limits on what developers
and
can
Amy
do.
And many others.
And Amy and others. We've had limits on what developers can do. We haven't had those same limits so much on what a private resident can do. And then there are, sometimes people do skirt the law in terms of like, it wasn't a developer, and they do things before the developer can get the property.
I should clarify the point that this was one of the points of compromise, in fact, in our original ordinance. One of the members of so our original proposal was that it was going to apply to all private property
Right.
without limitation. But in order to get it passed, one of the members of the Programs and Services Committee, who also happened to be the chair of the Finance Committee, felt strongly that it was too much of an imposition on owner-occupied property owners to require them to preserve the trees on their property. He even said, I've got a big tree in my backyard. I've been cleaning those leaves for a million years, and if I want to cut that tree down, I should have a right to cut it down. And basically, he had enough political strength on the city council at the time that the perception, at least, was that his desire needed to be accommodated. So we included a 1-year owner occupancy rule in the ordinance that basically, if you owned, if you had been an owner occupant for the last year, then you could cut down any trees on the property. We didn't want to make it less than a year because then someone could just move in for a week. A developer could buy the house, move in for a week, and cut down all the trees. So Emily's absolutely right. It was targeted at developers, but the way it was articulated was owner occupancy.
Right.
Owner occupants would be exempt, and that was one of the big 3 compromises. Well, I'll mention the others later, but.
So yeah, so that's one. I think people sometimes will hear back, well, the city should be focusing more on the street trees. There's actually a lot of state law governing street trees. We are losing our street trees, so we do need to be doing more on that. And we have made investments recently, and we're making progress in that area, but there's definitely more that we can be doing. There's a limit to how much public property we have. There are some berms that can't take trees. There's gas leaks that cause trees not to survive. So we do have some limits. We don't, I think for the reasons I was articulating in terms of the benefits trees provide, in terms of cooling the air, cleaning the air, protecting against flooding and so forth, we don't want to just be limiting our actions to the public street trees. So that was really the biggest insight. So that's why you've got, it doesn't mean you can't cut down a tree. It just means it's going to be a bit more expensive for you. And also, I would really want to say up front, this does not, we have exempted diseased or dangerous trees. So if there's a tree that is hollow inside, there's a tree that has been identified as unsafe, that can be taken down without having to pay any extra costs. So do want to make sure people understand that.
Melissa, what brought you to this issue? What made you think we needed to update our tree ordinance?
Well, it actually began very personally for me. 2 different property owners right next to my house each cut down 2 different very large oak trees. And in addition to losing the beauty of it, I live not far, I'm in Newton Upper Falls, and I live not far from Boylston. And when the first tree went down, we noticed the difference in the quality of the air right away. You could smell Boylston when you couldn't before. So we lost that. And after the second tree went down as well, that was south of us. So it got hotter, so we're spending more to air condition the house more in the summer, and we started getting flooding in the basement. So it made me realize that there are problems with this. And as I pursued and looked at the ordinance about what the regulations were, I mean, the person to the south of us has not moved into the house. So he has not lived in that house for a year before cutting it down. But the ordinance has changed since it was written to say that if someone promises to live in the house in the future, yes, the current ordinance says that you either have to live in it for a certain number of days before or promise to live in it for 18 months after you cut it down.
I don't think we included that originally. Is that?
That's what's there now.
I could be missing.
And so
maybe that may.
That's part of what's going on. And then on the other tree, they replaced it with this one tiny little sapling that just looks so pathetic. And it's going to be 40 years before that tree has any of the same kinds of benefits for protecting from the sun, for protecting from flooding, not to mention beauty. So that's what started me on this process. And I think those are some of the things that need to be done, right? That trees on all property needs to be protected. One of the traumas for me was that I didn't know the second tree was coming down until the bucket truck showed up. So notification of abutters, so that there's some opportunity to know, perhaps talk with your neighbor and see if you could persuade them otherwise. And also that one tiny little sapling doesn't do it. It doesn't do it for the common good. It also doesn't do it for the costs to abutters.
So thank you, Melissa. So I guess would be a good time for me to mention the other two issues that I thought were inadequate. And in fact, not just I did, but I believe Amy, she could speak for herself now. Mike, rest his soul, has passed away. But Mike did say to me at the time, basically, hey kid, you'll be around for a while. You should do these three things that we weren't able to get done this time. And the three things were, as I recall, the question of including owner-occupied properties as well as properties that were owned by developers. The second was including more of the smaller trees that weren't included originally, because a tree had to be pretty large to get in under the threshold under our compromise. And the third was the amount of tree that we replace it with, because the idea that basically the way our formula worked is if you had a 40-inch tree, which is massive, that could be replaced on an inch-per-inch caliper basis. So a 40-inch caliper could get replaced by 22-inch trees, and 22-inch trees are a lot less tree than one 40-inch tree. And so we talked about one of our drafts, and one of the things we were talking about was be doing it based on the surface area of the cross-section lost, not based on the number of inches to require, so that would take an awful lot of little trees. The other fundamental flaw in the ordinance, that we had is that because, this is just the math based on those two flaws, is that you could cut down a 40-inch tree and 22-inch trees and replace them under the existing ordinance with 22-inch trees. In other words, you'd end up with the exact same, because you don't have to replace the 2-inch trees,
right.
And the 2-inch trees could replace the 40-inch tree,
right.
And therefore you're net losing a 40-inch tree. So you're not really replacing what was lost in any kind of a reasonable way. And in fact, that is exactly what is happening across the street from my house on Walnut Street, where they've cut down a ton of saplings. They don't have to do anything to replace those. And they've cut down a bunch of big trees, and they'll just use little saplings to replace the big trees and end up with a net massive loss of trees. So that having been said, this other issue has also come up, this fourth issue of notification. Is there anything else that's a pressing issue to
Those are the
update
big
the
ones.
ordinance? Okay, so why don't we? I think. Why don't we go to our? Actually, so now what we have is you and your co-docketers, Julia Malky and others, about half the city council, it sounds like, filed an amended ordinance. It sounds like the mayor also filed. The mayor has a proposal as well. And so what I'd like to do at some point in the show is talk about the differences between the two as best we can, to understand what the choices that the city council are making. So I know that there are things that if we can talk about on these big issues, big topics, what the current ordinance says, what your proposal says, and what the mayor's proposal says, and talk about. But before we do, I think it would be helpful to get a look at what kinds of things are happening under the current ordinance. So if maybe we can put some of these sort of before and after pictures up if we have them, or also would be interesting to some of the measurements so people can get a sense of what different tree sizes are. So Will, if we can put any of that up, or just a picture of something, I don't know. You got a picture of a tree, let's throw it up there. There we go. This is a 14-inch tree. So this is how old, Melissa, would you say that tree is? Any idea?
Oh, I actually don't know,
okay.
but I do know that when Mark Welsh, who is Newton's city forester, was calculating a mature tree for a presentation he did for the Trees as a Public Good Network, he used a 17-inch tree to represent a mature tree, which he said should be about 30 years old.
Okay, I used the wrong example. Should have shown a 17-inch tree for the for the mature tree. So how many? 30 years old.
That's what he said, about 30 years to maturity, and that was a 17-inch maple. So you can see how large this tree is. Sorry, I'm seeing it over your shoulder here.
Okay, yeah, there it is.
You can see how large this tree is, and that's maybe just into maturity.
Okay, that's not quite a 17-inch mature tree. All right. And to be clear, that's covered under our existing ordinance, right? If a 14-inch tree.
If it's a developer's property.
Right. I mean, it's big enough if it's not owner occupied.
Right. The current ordinance does 8 inches and above if
Right.
it's not an exempt lot.
Right. Sure. Will, can we look at some more examples? Do we have more examples? I thought we might have some little ones and maybe like a 47-inch one just to contrast it.
So that's a 30-inch tree.
Oh, there it is. Okay, now I can see it too. All right. It's behind me, a 30-inch. I'm being snuck up on by a 30-inch tree. So, again, let's. So this gives us a sense of the sizes of the tree. So why don't we go to our. I think we've got actually a few pictures I would like to show our audience of what some of the sites in Newton look like with trees and then with the trees cut down. So I'll give Will a minute to.
There's one.
Oh, okay. Again, I'm not. There it is on the screen where our viewers can see it. It's 40 Ferncroft Road, Fernwoods Wood in West Newton, and this is pictures taken in July and August. So that's a pretty nice tree there. You don't know?
It was.
Well, right, and it looks pretty different.
And what's more, if you look at that, so they obviously took down the small house there, but if you look at the placement of the tree, it was right on the property line. They didn't need to take that tree down to raise the house and to put in a new one, right? It was so close to the property line, it could not have impeded on whatever size house they would put in replacement.
So another benefit of making it harder, by that we mean more expensive to take down trees, is it'll make anyone think a little bit more like, do I really need to take it down? Because we do see, and we have more examples of this, where similar to this situation, where the tree is not located where they put a new house. So sometimes the developers will do it because it's easier to bring their trucks in and out. Whereas with this ordinance in place that we're proposing, maybe they would go the extra mile to drive around the tree.
Or the extra few inches of caliper, maybe?
Or exactly, whatever metaphor you want to use.
No,
Right.
So it is fun. There's one other thing I forgot to mention about our existing ordinance, which I'm sure you're both aware of, which is there is an option to pay into a fund rather than even to replace the trees. And that happens a lot of the time. People will just clear cut a property
Right.
and write a check.
Right.
So do we have any other before and after photos, Will, or is that?
Yes.
There's another one. over there.
Okay, great. So we're looking at 1270 Commonwealth Avenue here. And this is from 2020, so a couple of years ago, almost 2.5 years ago now. And this is so an extension of an exempt lot. So in other words, they didn't have to pay into the tree ordinance for this, presumably.
Right.
And
Right.
again, you can see where the trees are located is not where the new house is.
Right.
So they do have a circular driveway, they have a lot of pavement. Most certainly this area is seeing a lot more heat and dirtier air as a result of the choice that was made, and possibly not by the existing owner, possibly by a developer.
Well, that's often the case, right?
Right.
Because,
Right.
Yeah, this is the owner-occupied loophole
Right.
that, and I think maybe we did put in that promise for 18 months. And I think I vaguely remember some discussion of whether people would actually keep that promise and
Right.
what would you do?
How would you
Glue
enforce that? Right.
the tree back in if not so productive.
Right.
I guess we should probably now dive into what the options are before the city.
He did put another.
Oh,
example up.
okay. Let's look at one more of these then. So this is 181 Upland Road in Newtonville, 2019. So this is the last demolition or last clear cutting before the pandemic, perhaps, or one of them.
Yeah, and you can see they
Yeah,
cut down.
that's actually because you're looking at it from above. You can see
they
how
took down.
They took
so
down
much tree
Basically
coverage.
everything.
Yeah. So that's
So that's what you're trying to prevent.
yeah, which some of
Yes.
it looks like you would have need to do that new house, but not all of it.
Okay.
So again.
So what, I guess what I want to ask you, we can do the comparison of the ordinances, but looking at these specific scenarios, would these have been allowable? The things that were allowed under the existing ordinance, could they happen under your proposal? Could they happen under the mayor's proposal? Or how would they be affected under those various
So
proposals?
a big difference between our proposal and the mayor's proposal is that she maintains most of the homes as exempt. So if you want to take down a home in a single family lot area, take down a tree in a single family lot area, you would be allowed to do that without paying any additional cost up to a 55-inch tree.
55 inches. Now,
Yeah, in fact, there are hardly any of them in the whole city. So Julia Malachy drove around with former councilor Barbara Broussel-Glazer, who is our model in some of these photos.
Yes.
And I think they found one on Chestnut Street.
Yeah.
A 57 inch,
No, a
right?
59 inch.
59.
Yeah, I mean, there really aren't hardly, so it really wouldn't protect
So
hardly.
here's a example of a 47. So this tree is not big enough
No,
to be
w-
covered
protected.
under the mayor's
Now hers
proposal.
would if it's in a multi-zone, or excuse me, multi-unit, 3 to 4.
Three or more.
3 or more units, but your single family, your two family, only at 55 inches. So this tree that we're looking at right now would not be covered under the mayor's proposal, and it would be covered under our proposal.
Unless, wait, there is one stipulation. It would be covered if the owners disclose that they're going to do construction sometime in the next 24 months.
So if they fail to disclose that, then
So that's the question. The way the phrasing currently is, it says if there is no planned construction
Right.
in the next 24 months. So how would the city ever fight back against somebody saying, well, I didn't plan to do it then?
Well, it's just so interesting you mentioned it depends on the zone, because one of the things I remember very clearly being advised by the law department is we could make nothing dependent on the zone, or it would take a 2/3 vote of the city council to pass, because it would be a zoning amendment. Everything we did had to be citywide. So it's interesting that you say the mayor's proposal has differences in different zones. Presumably that means the mayor's proposal would take a 2/3 vote of the city council to pass.
No, I don't mean that. I mean the units. I don't think they've worded
No,
as the
they haven't
zone.
worded it as the zone. They've worded it as the number of units on the lot.
Currently on the lot, or proposed for the lot?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I think the way it's phrased, it's the number that are currently on the lot. I believe, but I don't, that's a good question. I don't know.
Well, we try to not walk anywhere near the line of talking
Yeah.
about, because it does tend to be in a different zone that you could have more units,
Right.
and that might be presumed to be a zoning ordinance. We stayed as far away from that line as
Yeah.
we could, because honestly, I didn't think I was worried. We ended up getting like a 19 or 20 votes for it, I think.
Right.
But I don't think, we were worried
Right.
about
Yeah.
getting 16.
So what's currently up there now is the chart that shows some of the differences. And so it's the way that the proposal from the administration says that for 3 or more family units on a lot, or if it's non-residential, commercial lots, whether there's construction or not, then they will require replacement trees for trees that are 6 inches DBH or larger.
Okay, I'm
So
sorry.
that's a change from currently it's 8 inches.
So the mayor's proposal is to say that if it's not owner occupied, right now, if you have a 7-inch DBH tree, you can still cut that down. Your developer, you can cut down those 7-inch trees.
Right.
But under the mayor's proposal, you couldn't do that anymore. Is that right?
Well, okay, so what's confusing about it
Or is it the owner, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I don't think
I
we're
said-
not doing owner occupied
Wait,
anymore.
could maybe you could get him to put the chart back up.
Okay.
What's confusing is that the
I don't know
mayor's
if anyone can read that.
the mayor's proposal, well, the takeaway point, if you look at the orange ones, there's 5 categories up there.
Okay.
So there's 5 different versions of trees that are protected or not under which conditions.
Okay.
Right? The green one is the one that Emily and Julia and the others proposed, and there's one for the whole city.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a lot simpler.
So it's
So different, what are all these different categories that are under the mayor's proposal?
so it talks depending on how many units are on the lot and whether or not construction is disclosed. that varies what size
Why would
tree is
anyone
protected.
disclose construction if disclosure would result in
That
more
is an
restrictions?
excellent question.
I would
We have,
agree.
we have pointed that out.
I mean, unless there's some penalty for
I think
failure
the
to
idea is that
disclose.
even with the mayors, you'd have to get a permit. Even if you didn't have to pay anything, you'd have to get a permit. So then if there was construction later, as disclosed in a building permit
What if they just
application,
changed their mind, though? They didn't have anything to disclose.
that has, yes, people have raised that.
You can't disclose something you don't know about.
Exactly, and you can change your mind. People's life circumstances change. Maybe you need an addition that you didn't know
And
about.
no one would ever know whether you secretly intended to do that
Right.
at the time you cut down the trees.
Right.
It seems like a loophole you could drive a truck, potentially a lumber truck through.
A bucket truck.
Right.
But one of the other parts that worries me is the forestry department in Newton right now is short on staff. So even if the intention was, okay, we're going to have somebody in the forestry section who is going to check every single building permit to make sure that these people didn't cut down a tree before. Then you might do it. I mean, you'd still have lost the tree, right? And so it would still be chasing money rather than preventing tree cutting, which is the most important thing. But we don't have the staff for that. The tree warden has made it very clear that he has limitations given the staffing.
And
he
Mark
has.
has done a fabulous job, and he's been there for a long time. We worked with Mark when
Yes.
we did the original
Yes.
ordinance. So Mark Welch.
Yes.
Who's been our director of urban forestry in Newton as long as we've had
Yeah,
one, I think.
over 20 years. Yeah.
Yes.
So I guess it's about 20 years we've had this ordinance, so something like that.
Yes.
So what I'd like to do is go to our second topic where we compare these, and I think we've identified 4 subtopics, and I want to really hone in to the extent we can on the very specific scenarios so people can understand what the difference is on these 4 issues among these 3 things. What's the law now, what the mayor's proposing, what the councilors, Emily Norton and half the city council are proposing. So topic number 2, barking up the wrong tree ordinance revision, potentially. Thank you, appreciate that.
Okay.
You can catch me Friday night upstairs
Yeah.
at the Middle
Yeah,
East.
I don't know if it's just after the pandemic, we just have a lower barrier for laughing, but
Yeah, I know. All right. Well, let's not get off on a tangent. To go back to the main branch of this conversation. Sorry.
leave it alone, Ken.
Thank you. I've already used that one tonight, but okay.
That's okay.
All right. Okay. I'm rooting for you to come up with something better.
I think our mics will be cut soon. It's your show, and they'll still do it.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, the first of these 4 topics are how big a tree needs to be, putting aside whether it's an exempt or a non-exempt lot. I mean, not in every. So it sounds like just in terms of tree size, is there a difference between the councilor proposal and the mayor's proposal? Right now, you've already said the existing is 8 inches.
Yep, we both go down to 6 inches.
So that's the same under both.
Yep.
Okay.
Right. It's just a matter of exemptions.
Okay.
or not.
Well,
Okay.
what's the difference between 8 and 6? Why go to 6?
It's just a number to pick. I think we also looked at Cambridge.
Yes.
Because they just updated their tree ordinance and they went to 6 inches. And
So Cambridge actually changed it very quickly. They did this new tree ordinance when they put the new one through that covers all private property, all property in the city, period. They started it at 8 inches, and then very quickly, within a few months, they went back and revised it and did 6 inches.
Do we know why? Were there a bunch of trees being cut down? People were upset were being cut down? Or?
Yes, I think that was part of what was going on. And 6 inches is large enough that you get shade benefits, you get air quality benefits, you get water drainage benefits.
yeah, do you have any of the 6-inch
We had,
photos?
I think there was a 7-inch. We don't have a 6-inch photo, actually. We have a 7-inch photo.
Okay. Because if you see it, I think it helps people understand that
Right,
it's still a
okay.
pretty
That
big
it's
tree.
still a pretty substantial tree.
Okay. And the replacement trees, they tend to be like these 2-inch caliber.
Right. In terms of,
Right.
you really can't move a relatively
Well, it's
well-established.
incredibly expensive.
It's
to.
expensive and it often doesn't work. you're
So,
spending
so
money
this
not
is
doing it anyway.
showing the
Ah,
2-inch caliper tree,
So
which
it-
are often the new replacement trees.
Yeah. So that the 2-inch there would not be. Anyone can cut that down.
Right. Anyone can cut that down, and if someone cuts down one of those big, healthy 17-inch ones, they just need to replace it with 8 of those 2-inch ones.
Right, which does not actually replace the ecological benefit and the cooling and the stormwater retention and
But
so forth.
that's true under the existing ordinance
Right.
as well.
Right.
So the change is 8 to 6 inches.
Right.
We've gotten
Right.
through subtopic A, I guess. Second thing that we were concerned about with the original ordinance was this owner occupancy. Now, you were saying that is different in the mayor's version than your version? In other words,
Yeah, it's more this disclosing of construction.
well, so let me just give the example. If I decide, hey, I've got a big tree in my backyard, I'd like to cut it down, I live in my house, under the current ordinance, I can cut it down. I know that. There's nothing I have to do. I don't need a permit. I just need a tree company. I can call, Whoosy Whatsy Dingledale Tree and say, get rid of that tree. I don't want it there anymore.
Right.
It bothers me. I hate trees. They could say, someone's going to take that clip and take it out of
People do
context.
say they don't like to pick up the leaves. They don't want the branches to fall. So they don't like the acorns. They don't like, we do hear,
Okay.
these things.
And by the way, there may be legitimate reasons why people want to build a deck and other
Right,
things where they might,
right.
they might actually have a reason to get rid of it.
Yeah.
But all kidding aside, under the current ordinance, there is no restriction in an owner-occupied lot. Now, under your proposal, would I have to do anything differently to remove that tree? Owner-occupied.
If it's over 8 inches? I'm sorry.
Yes, we're talking about-
6 inches?
Let's just say it's a nice 30-inch mature tree.
Yeah, you'd have to get a permit and you would have to pay more than you do now. And we have not determined yet how
When you
much.
say more than I do, I don't need to pay anything now, do I? Or
Exactly.
Well, so right.
Well, you got to pay to take the tree down.
No, I don't mean, I mean the city. There's no
Right.
permit now. So do I have to replace it? What do I have to do under your proposal?
You would have to, you'd possibly have to replace it, but you would have to pay a mitigation fee. And we have not determined exactly how much that would be. There are several options under consideration that the Programs and Services Committee are talking about, hopefully next week or the
Okay.
week after.
Okay, so, but I know they're talking about comparing these proposals, and I've been looking at these comparison charts
Yeah.
between the councilor proposal and the mayor's proposal. But what I'm asking is, it would be covered. I would have to mitigate in
Right.
some way. Right.
Right.
I couldn't just cut that down
Right.
and not either pay a fee or replace. Presumably,
Right.
I could say I'm cutting this down, and if I wanted to replace it with just as big a tree, I'd probably be fine under it, right? Or if you could theoretically do that.
Well,
no?
one of the things, and this is actually the same in both the mayor's proposal and the councilor's proposal, is that the replacement inches are going to go up.
That's my next topic.
Yes.
So how much you need to replace it? But my question now is, under the councilor proposal, I need some kind of fee or replacement.
Right, so-
I'm covered.
Well, so the difference is the mayor's version says you have to replace it, and if you don't replace the full number of inches, then you have to pay. But the councilor's version,
Well, just to be clear, I would have to do that under the mayor's proposal?
Yes.
Even if it's owner occupied?
if
Even
there's construction
No, no construction. I'm going to live
if-
there.
if-
I'm not talking about
Only
that.
are
tonight.
you in
55
a?
inches.
Is it a single house or are you a
I'm
three-unit
single-
condo?
There's one
no,
house.
then
Then no, you wouldn't have to pay
Under,
anything.
this is what I'm trying to hone in
You wouldn't
on.
have to pay anything or
I'm
replace
sorry,
anything.
I'm moving very micro on you.
No,
I
no,
know,
no, that's fine.
Yeah, I just don't want to. There's so many different
Right.
moving pieces to this, and you're both so versed in it that
Right.
you can understand how all they interact. But I just want to talk right now to Mr. and Mrs. Smith, or to whoever
Right.
living in Newton. You've got a tree in your yard right now. You can cut down that tree. Big
Right.
old tree in your backyard.
Right.
You can cut it down. Don't have to pay any other than, of course, the cost of removing the
Right.
tree. You don't need a permit.
Right.
You don't need to replace it. You
Right.
don't need to pay a fine. You don't need to pay a mitigation fund.
Right.
Right.
I understand that under the councilor's proposal, you would need to mitigate it in some way,
Yes.
the loss of the tree to the
Yes.
community. So my question is, what happens under the mayor's proposal? 30-inch tree, single family, owner occupied, no disclosure about development. Is that tree covered at all?
You have to show that it's not covered by getting an exemption permit. But
So you
the
need to-
exemption,
okay.
so you have to do some paperwork, but it won't cost you anything. There's
So-
zero fee for it, and you would not have to replace the tree or or pay anything.
So just to understand this, so it sounds like that's more work for the tree warden than currently, because the tree warden doesn't come out and look at it. If my yard, if I wanted to cut down my tree now, owner occupied. So the mayor's proposal creates more work, but doesn't in any way protect the tree.
Right.
Right.
Okay. I mean, that may sound like an opinion, but I'm just trying to articulate the facts of what the proposal. What is have we heard a rationale for why you would require a permit if there's nothing you have to do? If there's no mitigation at all?
My understanding from things that Mark Welsh has said at the Programs and Services Committee meeting is that the goal is to know how many trees we're losing on private property, because right now there's no data collection where because people haven't had to get any kind of a permit, we actually don't know how many trees we're losing on private
Don't we
property.
have some estimates? I thought I read something about we've lost 50% of our
Those are
trees.
street
Those
trees.
are for
Oh, they're
street
street trees,
trees,
okay.
because Mark Welsh and his crew keep very careful count of those, and he has the numbers and the data for that. But we've asked him several times, and he has said there is no data on how much is lost.
So there is a rationale. So not to disparage
No,
this.
yeah.
Yes.
There's a reason why you might want to require people to get a permit, even if they can just get the
And
permit.
then also, in theory, if they then apply for a building permit to do something, so it really does look like the tree removal was related to that, in theory, the city could enforce that.
And if they remove the tree without getting a permit, then what? There's a fine, or what
We haven't
happens
gotten
to them
that
then?
far.
But there is a fine written into it, a violation.
Right.
There are violations.
discussed that
Is
yet.
the fine enough that it's going to dissuade anyone, or we don't know what that would be?
It,
Because the fines in Newton for things like this tend to be so small that people might just figure that it's a minuscule, de minimis cost.
So Massachusetts state law limits the violation fine to $300.
And it hasn't changed, by the way, since I was first on the city council, the Board of Aldermen in 1992. It's always been $300.
So
no inflation adjustment on that one.
So what a lot of the city ordinances do, including the current tree ordinance, is it makes each day a separate violation. So it's $300 a day. And
So once you've cut down the tree, you're in violation forever? Is that the idea?
I don't know what would get you out of violation. That's a good question.
It hasn't been heard in finance yet.
And I don't think the city has ever fined someone $300 a day for taking down a tree that they weren't supposed to indefinitely, in cases where the ordinance did apply. I'd be interesting to hear how they've actually enforced it in the past. What kind of fines have been
They
levied?
come up with arrangements with the developers. So the storage facility on Lewis Terrace and Newtonville Ave, there was some tree destruction there that was not authorized, and so I think they had to pay about $20,000, which to them, I'm sure, was like whatever.
These properties can go for more than that.
Right.
More than so, there are houses in Newton that are like over $500,000 now. It's hard to believe. Who can afford that? But yeah, they're really expensive.
Yeah.
Maybe even over $600,000.
Our tree warden, by the way, is an expert within the state. So we are we're very lucky to have someone who's so well qualified in this and very passionate about trees. In fact, Melissa had organized a webinar in April where Mark spoke and Cindy Cream spoke. Our state senator actually has filed a bill that would support cities and towns with the goal of having at least 60% tree canopy coverage. Newton does not have that. We're under 50%. So
Really? We think of ourselves as a Tree City USA.
we have lost a lot of trees over the years. We also have some great maps showing the inequities across the city, showing how much tree canopy coverage there is sort of from satellite data, where Waban is like 100% covered, and then parts of West Newton, Nonantum, Upper Falls, much less coverage there. So there's also an equity component to all of this, because if you have less tree coverage, again, you have dirtier air, hotter air, more flooding. There's also mental health
Isn't there
benefits.
this global warming thing that people are sometimes talking
Well,
about?
what's interesting is, not to nerd out a little bit, but with climate change, you've got sort of two buckets of action. Your mitigation, which is reducing burning of fossil fuels, what causes global warming and climate change, and then adaptation or resilience, which is, well, how are we going to deal? How are we going to protect people? Trees actually do both because they prevent the flooding, they address the cooling and so forth, but they also sequester carbon. So they're incredibly, incredibly valuable. They're very important urban infrastructure is what Cindy Cream called them. And actually, Michelle Wu, the mayor of Boston, was on the webinar.
That sounds
as well.
pretty hot, urban infrastructure. Wow.
And green infrastructure. So there's green housing practices, which says that for low impact development, construction should be sited on a lot in a way that works around existing green infrastructure, which means trees, any brooks or wetlands, those kinds of things, that architects who are doing green practices can design around them.
So it sounds like, just to wrap up this subtopic, that the mayor's proposal would require owner-occupants who are not in that, we'll call it pre-development category, to file paperwork, in other words, with the city, but not to actually mitigate the loss of trees. Right. Whereas
unless it's a 55-inch tree.
Right. Okay. Under 55, but which virtually don't exist in Newton.
Right.
Okay. So there may be a few ancient elms somewhere in the city that, I don't know, whatever the biggest trees we have are that would be covered. But by and large, that's the exception that proves the rule. The councilor's proposal would require mitigation. The exact extent of that mitigation has yet to be determined, which segues beautifully into the next thing I wanted to talk about, which is one of the things that we bemoaned in our original ordinance, is there was inadequate mitigation. And so what I was wondering about is whether either of these proposals does anything about that. In other words, the idea that you can take this 40-inch tree and replace it with 20, those 2-inch little nothings, always struck me as kind of a joke. And I was a big proponent of rounding up the votes because we thought of it as incremental. Like the next thing will happen and it'll get better, and it's been a generation, really.
Right. There is a mindset that, including by at least some people on the city council, that the way we've been doing it now, where you cut down this tree, you plant these, you've made everyone whole. And that's really not how the science works. So this is literally, I'm going to quote a few things that Mark Welch brought up in this webinar. When it comes to stormwater, a mature tree, which
That's the 30-inch one?
The 30-inch,
No,
17.
The 17-inch.
Oh,
He did
17.
those
17
calculations for the
17-inch, 30
17.
year.
Oh, 30 year,
17
I'm
inch,
sorry,
30
thank you.
year. So just that's the example versus one of these brand new trees. The
And
stormwater.
there we have a
Yes.
17-inch tree
Yes.
right there in the illustration.
So
on
the
screen.
stormwater captured, 1,900 gallons a year for a mature tree versus 160 gallons.
So wait,
for a young-
1,900, I need to think about this.
1,900 versus 160.
1,900, so that's more than 10 times as much.
It holds so much more stormwater at a time when we are already seeing more intense
So
rainstorms.
that's
and we're going
17-inch
to see
versus how many inch? I mean,
like a brand new tree like the one you just
Okay.
The
showed.
2-inch.
Carbon sequestered, okay, again, just a couple numbers, 2,600 pounds per year with a mature tree, 60 pounds with a brand new tree. Again, massive amounts. And
how much is 20?
2,600 versus
2,000?
60.
So that's like versus basically nothing, 60.
Exactly. And then the last one I'll give the example of is energy conserved. So this is kilowatt hours, 1,300
This is
kilowatt
cooling
hours.
effect to that
Yes.
trees?
Basically, yeah. How much more would you have to run your air conditioning on average? 1,300 kilowatt hours versus 150 kilowatt hours. So again, almost 10 times as much. So add that up with multiple trees lost. And what he said was that basically if you really wanted to try to capture that, you'd have to plant 30 trees for every 17-inch tree that were lost.
So
Even
30
if,
of those 2-inch trees.
even if we had wanted to,
There's
do
not a
that,
place
we don't
to
have
put
the
that many,
space to do
right.
that. So it's really not realistic. It just drives home how important it is to protect the mature tree canopy that we have, and rather than be so cavalier about losing them.
So this is an interesting question, though. That goes back to something you were mentioning earlier, Emily, which is the idea that you're making people think about the choice, the externalities of the choice. That it's because a lot of times people might just say to the developer, "Do the house that I want. I want a new
Right.
thing." And if there was, I mean, the real question is how much does that cost have to be before anyone's going to pay any attention? Because I joke
Exactly.
about the $600,000 houses, which don't basically exist anymore in Newton.
Right.
These new condos like the ones near me, sold for $1.7 million on a,
Right.
like it's
On a
it's
major road,
unbelievable,
right.
these redeveloped properties. So the question is, if someone's spending literally millions of dollars on a big project, is anything that you're going to do going to matter? I mean, be enough to get people's attention?
So obviously we don't know yet because it's theoretical. We think that this would at least cause some people to think about it. Certainly people with private property will think about it. And hopefully developers will as well. I mean, particularly in a case where like
When you
some
say
of
with
these-
private, this is all private property. This isn't city property. It's all private property.
I mean,
Okay.
like a private homeowner, hopefully that will cause
Owner
them to think
occupied
about
versus
it. Yeah, I
developer.
mean, the developers, I agree, it's really, really tough. When you're spending $1 million for a tear down, I grant you. It is also our hope that this will act sort of as an education about the value of trees. I mean, I think sort of growing up or until now, it's sort of trees are like, yeah, whatever, sort of almost like a weed to some people. That you really don't want to think of them that way. You really want to think of them as vital infrastructure. We invest in police and fire to protect people, protect people's safety. This is something vital for people's safety. And if we can get that mindset change, then I think people will, even developers will think more about protecting the trees that are on the property, and that they would even think that having more mature trees on the property will be a selling point to the new homeowners in a way that is not the case now.
I think that probably the majority of Newton residents think that trees are not weeds and value them. I mean, I don't know if I've seen a survey on it, but
Maybe not using the term weed. I actually did do a survey, and we had, I want to say, over 1,000, close to 1,000 respondents. It was 937. And most people, and it wasn't scientific, but that's a lot of people to respond. Most people did say they would, over 50% said they would like to see more protection of trees on private property, which was kind of interesting. And then there were, I think another 20-something that wanted to see more protection on just public property. And then there's always the other that I have
Right.
to actually go read through the comments and see what they want. So that
well,
was
God bless you for taking the time to do that. I remember doing surveys.
Yeah. So no, it's great, and I really appreciate, because otherwise you can have sort of what you think is
Right.
the case, but
What do the constituents think? Right.
and I also think with climate change and the heat and the flooding and so forth, that people are having more of a mindset that things are different and we need to do things differently than even 10 years ago, 20 years ago. So I think that's weighing in as well.
Okay, so there's one more component to talk about here. And that, I mean, one more of the major differences is notification. So this is I could tell you a funny story. The way the ordinance currently works, as I understand it, and as I've seen it work, including when I was on the then Board of Aldermen and would get the constituent calls, is someone would call up and say, the beautiful oak right next to my property was just cut down by a developer. I thought they needed to, and it was partially over the line on my property,
Right.
and that shouldn't have been cut down. I thought I had a right to. Do I have a right to appeal? And so, well, there is a right to appeal, but you didn't know it was being cut down? Well, no, they had no idea until it was cut down. And the reason is there was never any notification.
Right.
And in this day and age of the internet, you'd think it would be pretty easy. We've got they know how to get us tax bills. They know how to. There's email alerts. They know how to get us. The mayor sends her newsletter out. Most people have email in the city. You could certainly opt into a tree notification list just to be notified when there's a tree removal permit. The irony is, if Mark Welch denies a tree removal permit to a developer, they always know it's been denied. There's never any notification problem. And they have a right to appeal that to the mayor. And I've seen that happen. I remember a negotiation with Mayor Cohen when Mark Welch denied a permit and they ended up letting him remove a bunch of trees.
Yes, we're seeing that with the Newton Cemetery.
Okay, so I guess
Yeah.
my point is, it would be great if you or the mayor's proposal, some proposal, in my ever so humble opinion, could solve this problem by
Yeah.
letting people know. I mean, because fundamentally, it just seems crazy to me that you have a right to appeal something, but you don't know that it's happened until the window of appeal is over. By the time you find out that that the permit was granted,
It's too late.
because they'll get a permit, and you have 7 days to
Right.
appeal, and then they wait till the 8th day to cut down they cut down the tree, you find out, it's too late, there's
And
no
also,
appeal.
there are a lot of other things that we do have notification for. So I'm in a historic district. Anyone wants to do anything, I want to put up shutters, I get notified. The parking rules being changed
Well,
on your
shutters,
street.
once they're up in defense, can never be moved or taken down. So that's a really permanent change, unlike cutting down a tree, where you can just stick it right back, right? I'm sorry,
parking
I've used
rules-
up my sarcasm for the evening.
Parking rules on your street, you get notified.
Mm-hmm.
Building permits, demolitions. So we already do have a practice of notifying people about
Well,
things.
demolitions are at least permanent, that makes sense.
Right.
I mean, all these other things,
But they're-
you could change them, right?
But they're going to affect you, so you
Right.
have a right to weigh in.
Right.
What I find really interesting is that at, I'm trying to remember if it was the November or the October Programs and Services Committee, Jonathan Yo was on. And
Now, so our audience is very sophisticated, but they might not know these names. This is former school committee member Jonathan Yo, who is now Chief Administrative Officer, I believe,
Yeah.
Yes.
of the city. In other words, he's what a lot of people would call the vice mayor. He's the assistant, the top manager of the city under the mayor.
Right. And when the Programs and Services Committee was discussing the issue of notification, Jonathan Yo said, notifying people is not a problem, but we don't want more appeals.
Well,
He actually said that.
well, that sounds like a case of trying to make the appeal illusory, at least as to the abutters. Because if the abutters don't know about it, then they can't appeal. But the developer or the property owner who's cutting down the tree, if they don't get the permit, they can't appeal. That just doesn't seem
Right.
fundamentally fair. So my question is, does your ordinance do anything about this, Emily?
We do require notification.
Of
yes.
whom?
Of the abutters, and I think we're still going back and forth on the details of how much. There actually is some support. There does seem to be a significant amount of support for the abutter notification. So
Is
I'm
it direct to
optimistic.
butters or butters to abutters? Or a
So
certain
the
number of feet?
original phrasing was wider than just the abutters, for it to be, I think, within 500 feet. But I
had to
don't
pare
think
that back a bit.
the programs and services, there was support for doing the immediate abutters.
Okay, so I'm going to I want to tell a secret to our viewers now, which is that the city councilors actually do care what you think, and I having served on the body for 18 years, if you care about being notified of trees being cut down or any of the tree issues we've talked about tonight, you can make a difference. You can email the mayor and the members of the city council, and you can. And I've talked with Josh Krinsman, the chair of the Programs and Services Committee, recently. He is committed to holding a public comment session, not a formal public hearing, but a public comment session. So you'll have an opportunity either electronically or in person to communicate, to send an email, to.
I think it'll probably be in Zoom.
Yeah,
on
to
Zoom.
participate in a Zoom meeting, but you could also send an email to
Yeah.
people if you can't attend that Zoom meeting. And if you want to do what the mantra of the environmental movement, think globally, act locally, this is a great way to do it, to protect our quality of life, the quality of air in the city, the heat islands, to break up the heat islands in the city, and to do our little bit to reduce global warming and climate change. I think this is fabulous. I really appreciate all the time that Melissa and Emily and all the others are putting into this. But I think that, ultimately what we're going to get out of this process is going to depend so much on whether people in the city speak
Right.
up about it. And so I do hope that folks in our audience will write to the, it's very easy these days to write a short email to the mayor and members of the city council. And does your group have a website that people can look at?
We have an email, so if you want to give us a hand, you can email protectnewtontrees@gmail.com.
protectnewtontrees@gmail.com. And Emily, do you have an email that people can reach you at if they want?
Yes, enorton@newtonma.gov. Whether you're happy with what we're talking about or not. Either way, it's not like we only want to hear from you if you agree.
enorton@newtonma.gov. All right, and of course it's all on the city website,
Yes.
newtonma.gov, all the counselors that you can write to. Thank you so much for joining us, both of you, Emily and Melissa. Thank you at home for watching. Thanks to our fabulous crew. We've got Will directing. We have Aiden on the switcher, and we have the wonderful people at New TV who make the show possible. Thank you at home so much for watching, and please join us again next time when we try to, we're going to talk about the override, next time when we try to find just a little bit more common ground.